Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jiva. (1884). And one of the questions that was asked by one of the devotees is, how long does one have to perform evening worship? In India, it is popularly known as Sandhya Vandana. So in the olden days, 100 years ago, I think it was a regular practice for people, especially religious-minded people, to perform what is known as Sandhya Vandana. It has come from the word Sandhi. Sandhi means the junction of day and night, or the junction early morning is one Sandhi, that is when the night at dawn and at dusk. And there is one Sandhi which happens at 12 noon, when the forenoon transforms itself into afternoon. So that is also a Sandhi. So whatever puja or regular ritual that you do at sunrise, noon, and also sunset, 3 times a day, that is known as Sandhya Vandana. But that used to be practiced. Now I don't think anyone does it anymore unless they are very orthodox. But anyway, evening worship or evening Sandhi Puja is more popular. It is known as evening Arati. Most of the people, whether they attend these Sandhya Vandana or Sandhya Arati as it is known in the temple, or they do it in their own personal shrine at home, the question that is being asked is, how long does one have to perform this ritual? So Sri Ramakrishna is answering this question. He says, as long as one does not develop bhakti for the lotus feet of the Lord. You see, when M, the recorder of this gospel of Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrut, he comes to Sri Ramakrishna, the first question he asks, because he believes that Sri Ramakrishna is also like the orthodox Brahmins of that period. And perhaps because it is dusk, he must be doing some Sandhya Vandana. That is what he thought. Being a Brahmo, he never followed those things, but he expected Sri Ramakrishna to follow that. So he politely asks the person who was standing outside whether Sri Ramakrishna is doing his Sandhya Vandana, or would it be right for him to go. That's during the first meeting. So then he's been told that Sandhya Vandana and all is meant for novices or those who are in the beginning of their spiritual journey. You can just walk in anytime. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa doesn't do it anymore. Not that he did not support that, but he had outlived the need for that Sandhya Vandana. So how long does one have to perform is a question asked by an aspirant who was present in this meeting. And Sri Ramakrishna says, as long as one does not develop, once you develop devotion to the lotus feet of the Lord, then the relationship, the spirituality is nothing but a relationship between you and your Ishta, the Lord whom you worship. You're supposed to have one particular Lord with whom, or one particular God with whom, or we can also say Ishta Devata, chosen ideal of all the different aspects of Godhood. You choose one that suits you, and then he becomes your Ishta, he or she becomes your Ishta Devata, and you worship that. And you try, according to Sri Ramakrishna, the worship becomes more fruitful if you have some kind of relationship with that deity whom you worship. Don't just consider the personality or the God whom you worship as a divine being, but apart from being divine, it has a human side. with which you can have relationship as you have with your parents, with your children. So develop one kind of relationship. That is what Sri Ramakrishna says here. And he says, if you have that kind of relationship, then there's no need for these rituals or these orthodox puja rituals, the Sandhya Arti. These are meant for people who are just introduced to religion. If they are just recently or newly introduced, then they need these spiritual practices so that the devotion develops. So the question that is being asked is, how long should one perform such rituals? So he says three indicators Sri Ramakrishna is mentioning. As long as one does not develop bhakti for the lotus feet of the Lord, that is one should develop that. Second thing is a bit more advanced. As long as the eyes do not fill with tears while repeating his name. And the third one is, as long as the hair of one's own body does not stand on an end. It's like some kind of experience which only advanced souls experience. When you see something very surprising or something phenomenal or something, when we have a experience, a spiritual experience, naturally your hair of one's body stand on its end. It's there mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, when having visions of Sri Krishna, Chaitanya used to experience that. It's not just a indicator which Sri Ramakrishna is saying, it's really something that happens when one is totally devoted to one's ideal, especially when one attains the culmination of bhakti. So then he sings a song from Ram Prasad, who is a famous worshipper of the Divine Mother. Says Ram Prasad, knowing the truth that Kali is the supreme Brahman, I bowed before both bhakti and salvation and gave up the ideas of what dharma and adharma are. I mean, dharma constitutes, as long as one is lukewarm in its devotion to the Lord, one is not fully dedicated, then he needs these rituals. He needs to hold on to these rituals so that that deep devotion is experienced by the sadhaka. But if one is already established, then he doesn't know, he doesn't need them and they become superfluous. He doesn't need to practice this Sandhya Vandana. That is the idea. And he is quoting Ram Prasad. There's a song which says, I have known, I mean, not just theoretically, but through experience or through my own experience, I've got the conviction that that which is known as Kali, whom we worship as Kali, ignorantly as a god with form, is nothing but the supreme Brahman. So having this knowledge, I accept both bhakti. When I worship God with form, I am a bhakta. But when I worship God, the supreme Brahman, I am a jnani. So now I have no need for dharma or adharma. What it really means is, I am not bound by the rituals anymore. That's the idea. So another example Sri Ramakrishna gives, the blossom falls off as soon as the fruit appears. So first the blossom comes and then the fruit appears and the blossom falls off. So when one develops bhakti, when one attains the Lord, Sandhya and all other rituals fall off. But they have to happen naturally. Sri Ramakrishna was obviously not hinting that one doesn't have to practice this. As long as you don't have deep devotion, you need to follow all these rituals, and till you don't experience these three signs, which he says, tears just come. Somebody was asking today one question that Vedantins have been advised, especially when you practice Advait Vedanta, they consider emotion to be an obstruction to sadhana. Because in dry jnana, it's always, in fact, Sri Ramakrishna prayed to the Divine Mother, said, don't make me a dry jnani. He was pointing out to a person who was full of jnana. So he said, don't make me a dry jnani. Let me be full of emotions. let me also enjoy the Lord, enjoy the beauty of bhakti. So Ram Prasad also, though he's a Gyani, though he has the chair set, though he has the experience of different experiences of God in his or her formless aspect, as well as God with form, and the relationship he has understood. Ram Prasad, in this song at least, he is making it very clear. I want to enjoy the formless aspect of God as a Gyani. There's nothing wrong to meditate on Brahman or to realize him as Brahman, the supreme Brahman. But I know in the heart of my hearts that supreme Brahman itself has come in the form of Kali for me to enjoy her at an emotional level, to enjoy her through bhakti, which is a kind of higher emotion. So in the tradition of bhakti, as opposed to tradition of jnana, emotions are not criticized, or maybe in the path of jnana, Shankaracharya has very often mentioned that emotions have no place, because in the dry realization that one gets, one has to subdue the emotions. But the beauty of bhakti is in subliming these emotions. The emotions have to be sublimated. When they are directed towards the gross, when they are directed towards worldly objects, they become emotions. But the same emotions, if they are directed towards God, they gets transformed into bhakti. So here Sri Ramakrishna is very clearly saying there's hardly any difference between bhakti and jnana. So then he gives another example. He says how we should not be lukewarm in our approach to sadhana or upasana. He says by leisurely playing the drum at a slow beat, you cannot attain much. A deep dispassion vairagya is needed. Stretching the year to 14 months is futile. It seems that you have no firm determination. It's a proverb in Bengali that a year has 12 months, but stretching it unnecessarily, dealing in, procrastinating and postponing things for the future is like stretching the 12 months to 14 months. So that's what he means here. So because this is a literal translation, stretching the year to 14 months is futile. Don't do it. It seems you have no firm determination, no grit. You are like flattened rice soaked in milk. Flattened rice soaked in milk makes it very soft. Flattened rice is like, they use it, they soak it in milk, they soak it in curd sometimes, and then eat it. If you try to eat it directly, it's a bit hard, but if you soak it, it becomes soft. He says that is not that softness, that kind of softness is not good. You have to be up and doing. That is why I don't like the song. See, he's singing a song here as an example. It's a famous song in Hindi. I don't know, somebody must have sung it in front of Sri Ramakrishna. Banat banat ban jai means there are many songs, folk songs. And one of the songs they say, don't be patient. Things will happen. Just go on. But Sri Ramakrishna said, that's not the attitude I like. That is why I don't like that song. Fasten thyself to Hari, O brother, and let things happen. You will sooner or later succeed. I don't like this particular phrase, sooner or later. I want deep dispassion. Perhaps he was referring to Hajra, who used to sit and misguide people. He normally used to sit near the entrance of Sri Ramakrishna's room, and he was a big nuisance, but anyway, Sri Ramakrishna tolerated him. He used to misguide people and tell them, you don't have to listen to all the things. Even he tried to convince Naren, who was very regularly visiting, and he was trying to make friends with him. So this Hajra he once told the same to Hajra, you are telling people, take it easy, you don't have to hurry. I don't like this attitude. Why? People who come here are sincere, they want to attain something. Why do you discourage them? That's what he told Hajara. I said, I want deep dispassion. I don't want this attitude of things will happen, just hold on to Hari and be lukewarm in your approach. It's a more scientific way of, or maybe more natural way of attaining God. What's the hurry? Enjoy the world for some time and then you have both. So that is what normally Hajra used to tell devotees. That's why he's referring to Hajra. He used to hold beads in his hand and act as if he's taking the name of the Lord. And whoever came, he knew that Sri Ramakrishna will give them a very strong tonic when they go inside. And he used to, when they came out, he said, what did he say? He was interfering too much in what was going on there. And once or twice, Sri Ramakrishna used to get upset. He said, why do you just confuse people? They come with certain kind of some determination or some yearning. They come, they want quick progress, and you tell them be lukewarm. So that's why he's hinting here to that devotee who asked. He said, you will sooner or later you will succeed. That's not the right attitude one should have. So then Sri Ramakrishna is telling the heading now, which we will be discussing. Sri Ramakrishna is the principle of yoga. There will be some questions asked about what yoga is and what are the impediments to yoga. That's the question. So you remember, this is the scene. The conversation is taking place in Dakshineshwar. And the people who have come here, you should remember that they are following different faiths. Some are Brahmos, some are Vaishnavas, some are Shaktas. And he's talking to a general audience. Though sometimes he is very specific, because he used to know as an expert teacher, he knew what is to be told to which person, and depending on the question and depending on his background, he used to give advice. So that is why one has to be very careful. Especially M has made a point to give a brief description of the person who is asking the question. When he first describes, either he has described this person earlier, so we all know who Hajra was, or the other people who have come, he gives their background so that people understand what is the background with which he has come. If he is a Brahmo, he has been told not to bow down before images. Image worship was not allowed. So he has come with that background, and he is asking, his questions are likely to be colored with that attitude. So Sri Ramakrishna will speak in a particular way to that person. And then somebody else is a very faithful follower of maybe Vaishnava or a Shakta tradition. So Sri Ramakrishna does not want to harm their feelings, but at the same time, he wants to tell the truth. He would not make any compromise. In fact, Hriday, his nephew, who was more keen to make friends with all the influential and rich people who came there, because he was a worldly person, though he was very devoted in his service to Sri Ramakrishna. He would often say that, uncle, you don't speak blunt truths to these people, then they'll stop coming. So Sri Ramakrishna is to get upset with him. He said, why do you want me to be so nice? What is truth is truth. I'll have to speak it out. For fear of losing their faith, or maybe because he was worried that some influential person who has a particular belief. Of course, Sri Ramakrishna was not so rude to anyone. But when it came to certain principles, he would not compromise. That's what you will find in this gospel. He was not here. He was not born to please people. If that was the case, he would have had a huge following. The whole room would have been crowded. And he mentioned also about this thing. I said, and another point which Hriday used to tell, he used to feel that the more the number of visitors come, maybe he'll have more contacts, because he was interested in that. He was not perhaps so much interested in what Sri Ramakrishna spoke or whether they made spiritual progress. He had that attitude. So also Hajra, who was sitting out, always used to sit near the gate and confuse people. And Sri Ramakrishna once or twice admonished him. Said, why do you sit and whether you believe in it or not, you don't confuse people by giving them. They are innocent people, especially the younger generation who used to come, like Naren and all. They used to catch them and misguide them. So here Sri Ramakrishna said, I told Hajra, don't say all these things to people. So there was a reason why he used to now and then go and admonish Hajra. But at the same time, he was very patient. He tolerated him. Then now he's coming to this point which I mentioned, principle of yoga. Now everybody wants a yoga which is very much suitable to their way of life. In other words, can yoga and bhoga go together? So if he says yes, then it's like giving license to people, which he doesn't want. Sri Ramakrishna did not mince words when he spoke. He just spoke what he felt, not what he felt, but what he knew to be the truth. How much of it you want to accept, that is, he used to give that example. When you eat the fish, if you want, you can cut off the head and cut off the tail, take the middle portion. I'm not asking you to take the whole fish, because everybody doesn't have the capacity to eat the whole thing. What he meant was, I will tell what I have to tell. How much of it you want to accept or practice, that is left to you. So I'm not forcing you, but I have to tell you the truth. That is the reason why now he is anticipating that the people who have assembled there, especially the Brahmo devotee, was asking this particular question: how much of vairagya, how much of dispassion should one have? And he anticipates that question, or maybe he has asked that question and says, you ask me why you don't develop deep dispassion. Means he's perhaps referring to that person who says, I am trying, but I don't develop that kind of dispassion. I just have passion for many things in the world. Then Sri Ramakrishna is giving the reason why all people do not feel dispassion for the things of the world. So, and that's why they don't make spiritual progress. So he says, why does it happen? Why does it happen that some people develop dispassion and some don't? Then Sri Ramakrishna gives a reason. He says there is a reason for it. You have a strong desire for sense enjoyments. So your mind is filled with pravrutti. You see, in India, the Indian philosophers, or maybe the Indian Dharma Shastras, they had a place for everyone. In fact, it would not be wrong to say that the highest Christianity, or Christ, Buddha, and these people, or the basic teachings of these great prophets, was mainly for monastics. Though, because they came with a very high ideal. And unlike these particular religions, though a lot of householders practice Christianity, a toned down Christianity or a toned down Buddhism, if you see the essential teachings, they are mainly meant for people who have a dispassion for this world. They spoke the highest, of course, as Sri Ramakrishna also said, you take whatever you like, but I'll speak the truth. So they also spoke the truth. As very often we see in the Bible, it is said, Christ was very particular when he took disciples. Many of the disciples, he said, sell whatever thou hast and come if you want to follow me. Many were inspired by him, the 12 fishermen who followed him. Many of them belonged to rich families, or they had a lot of wealth. So he said, if you want to follow me, then you have to leave everything behind. And many could not. So he told his disciples, pointing to these people, you can't have God and mammon at the same time. I mean, you can't have the world and have everything that the world offers and also want God. That cannot happen. So, but unlike these, the prophets who spoke the highest religion, Hinduism, or the Vedic religion, to be more precise, was a graded approach to religion. They had a graded approach, the rishis. They had dharma, they had artha. Artha means wealth. Kama, that is desires, legitimate desires, of course. Artha and kama had to be done in a dharmic way. You have to be ethical, and legitimately you can enjoy the wealth as well as the desires, that small desires that you have. There was nothing against in the Vedic religion. So it was meant to be for all people. It was not a predominantly monastic religion as Buddhism, the pure Buddhism, the message of Buddha and uh, uh, and Christ was. So I'm not talking of the Christianity and Buddhism as it is practiced now. I'm talking of the message of Christ and the essential message of Buddhism. It would be wrong to say that they are predominantly monastic religions, but they tend towards that. Whereas a Vedic religion was more balanced, they said there are 4 ideals, of which moksha or liberation, or in other words, nirvana of Buddhism is the highest. Moksha is the highest. But for that reason, you cannot deny a vast majority of the people in the world their legitimate desire to have artha and kama supported by dharma. So dharma comes first. So whatever you can legitimately earn, ethically earn, you have the right to enjoy that. The artha and kama has to be based on dharma. So artha means the wealth or whatever, the prosperity of the property and all the other things of the world which you acquire by practice of dharma. And kama is the legitimate desires which a householder can have and who is supposed to enjoy. So that was not there. That was that idea that every coat should fit everyone. Each one has his own coat. He can take how much the amount of advice what but Sri Ramakrishna said, I have to speak the highest. Depending on what your needs are, depending on what your swadharma is, depending on what your state is, you accept the proportion of dharma or proportion of artha and kama that you want to enjoy, and a little bit of desire for moksha. For majority of the people, that may be true. But here, Sri Ramakrishna is saying, I have to tell you the truth. You ask me, I mean, the person who is asking obviously is pointing out to Sri Ramakrishna that deep dispassion is impossible. We have so many things to attend to. How can we have deep dispassion for the world? Just by saying deep dispassion, can we have it? And of course, there was this Hajra who was saying, no, there is no problem. You can have both, enjoy the world and also have God. Maybe that is the reason. That is why he's again and again referring to this Hajra. He says one of the reasons, so this devotee is really interested to know why there is no deep dispassion. You always speak of dispassion, vairagya and all, but I don't feel that. So am I doomed? That's the idea. Then Sri Ramakrishna very nicely says, see, you have a strong desire for sense enjoyment, so your mind is filled with pravrutti. Now, what is pravrutti and what is nivrutti? Pravrutti means, there are 2 words in Hindu scriptures. It's a very, very important distinction they make, pravrutti marga and nivrutti marga. So Swami Vivekananda so beautifully explains it in Raj Yoga. Pravrutti means, literally, if you take the Sanskrit meaning, pravrutti means circling around one point. Pravrutti. The vritti or the waves go towards a point. Nivrutti means going against the normal trend. So the natural trend is to heap everything around yourself. My property, my money, my house, my children, my family. That way you go on adding, gathering things around yourself. That is known as pravrutti. And there's nothing wrong, because there is a pravrutti marga. Not wrong in the sense, ultimately, you cannot force nivrutti. Nivrutti means when you understand that you have heaped so many things around yourself, you are no longer able to handle it, then you progressively say, now I want to get rid. A stage comes. Everyone, Sri Ramakrishna Swami Vivekananda says, nivrutti cannot be forced. Pravrutti, you don't need to force anybody. It is a natural tendency of people to heap everything. That is a self-centered approach. Ranganathanji used to use a beautiful, our 12th president used to, 13th president of our order, he used to say, he used to use English words. If you just say pravrutti and nivrutti, nobody would understand in the West. So he would say, one is self-centeredness. Everything is self-centered. Does it make me happy? Does it make me rich? Does it make me powerful? Everything is self-centered. But it's not so easy to get rid of selfishness. Everything you do for the self. The only thing, it is the limited self that is we are dealing with. So he said, unlighted selfishness. I mean, what does he mean actually? Instead of nivrutti, he's saying, be enlightened. You cannot prevent yourself from being selfish. No matter how much you tell a person, don't be selfish. Ultimately, our nature itself will make us follow pravrutti. Because that has been our tendency right from childhood. We have always told our children, you should become like this, you should be have good marks, you should have attain this, you should do all these things so that you become happy. So all this pravrutti is very natural. You don't have to teach it. We are taught pravrutti right from the day we are born. This is your father, this is your mother, this is your property, this is your house. Pravritti comes very naturally. So Sri Ramakrishna says, mind is filled with pravritti. The problem comes when you want to follow the path of nivrutti. And Holy Mother used to give a beautiful example, still more easy to understand. No technical words are used. Holy Mother used to say, when suddenly one woman came, and she had just given birth to another child. In those days, they had many children. And suddenly she comes, as most of the people come. Why don't I get vairagya? Why don't I get this passion for the world? Then mother said, Are, you have just given birth to a child. Now you suddenly want vairagya. How can it happen? Just wait. Then she very nicely explains. She says, you have taken a reel and wound so many threads, red, then green and blue, and there is of course white thread, but then you have wound so many threads, and now suddenly you want the white thread. What will you do? You will unwind them slowly. First to unwind the last thread, the green one or maybe the blue one, then slowly till the white one, you come back to that original state. So that unwinding has to be done slowly. So Sri Ramakrishna says, I told the same to Hajra. And then he gives a beautiful example. You see, that is the beauty of gospel. He doesn't indulge in philosophy. These high-sounding words, pravrutti, nivrutti. He will just give an example which people were used to observe. Day-to-day examples. Things which used to happen in and around Kamarpukur, or the village where he lived. So he says, in the countryside, that's why it's sometimes better if there is a beautiful book by one of our Swamis, Vidyatmananda. He found that when he was reading the gospel, which is of course not a good name, it should be translated Sri Ramakrishna Kathamruta. Kathamruta means it's not literally the gospel. Gospel gives you an idea of the gospels of Christianity or some other religion. But the meaning, when it was translated for the Western readers, Swami Nikhilananda, whose 42 translation is what is available now, abridged one, and this translation which we are referring to are a little different. Here, whatever examples Sri Ramakrishna has given in the original Kathamruta, Sri Ramakrishna Kathamruta, which Bengalis or at least Indians can definitely identify with, because they have seen this countryside. It may not be very common in the Western world. So that is why they have removed all these examples a little bit or tried to explain it. But Swami Vidyatmananda, what he did in the 70s, he went to India, when he went to India, he visited Kamarpukur Jairambati, and all the examples that Sri Ramakrishna had given. It's a beautiful book. It's still though it is out of print. It was printed in our Vedanta issue. So there he took pictures of every example or whatever examples he could see in Kamarpukur and Jairam Bhatti, actual pictures, and then place the parable just beyond below that or near that page, so that people can see exactly what that thing is. So here also he is giving an example how the farmers in Bengal bring water to their fields. So he's saying, I said the same to Hajra, giving this example. In the countryside, before they bring water to the fields, they make mud ridges on all the four sides of the field so that the water cannot flow out. You can see it in any part of India if you go, or even maybe other countries also, where the water has to flow through gravity, where you can't have this drip irrigation and other techniques. You need water to flow along with gravity. So you have to have these mud walls. So mud ridges are made so that the water cannot flow out. If one particular area field has to be irrigated, especially in rice, you need the water. You need lots of water. So these mud ridges but they also make sure that there are no water outlets. You may have made a ridge and it may prevent water, but unfortunately, rats make a lot of holes there. So he said there are mud ridges, but they still have hidden water outlets, which are unintentional. And the farmer realizes that I'm pouring so much of water, allowing the water through the gate, and these mud ridges they are preventing it from flowing out, but the water is not retained. What happens to this water? There are mud ridges, but they have water outlets here and there, but there are more holes than these. Outlets can be blocked, but not these holes are so numerous, depending on how many rats are there. So they have water outlets here and there. There are holes. Water is brought with full force to the field, but it goes out through the holes. Our desires are like these holes. All the worldly desires. So you can't expect the water to retain the water if there are holes. Through one desire, a little bit of spiritual energy or the spiritual effort that you do goes. Through another desire, a little more goes. So you may be practicing japa. You may be practicing a lot of japa, repetition of the God name, and then go on complaining that nothing is happening in my life. But he says, all these austerities, all this sadhana, you will find have been drained out through the back of your mind, through these holes. So you may have a subtle desire for sense enjoyments, which are like these little holes. And from these outlets of desire, everything leaks out. Then another example, to understand this example, you need to actually see that picture, but I'll try to explain. This is a typical trap which some fishermen in some parts of Bengal use. So he says one catches fish with a bamboo trap. Unless you see it, Vidyatman has taken a beautiful picture of that, because the Western readers cannot make any sense out of this bamboo trap. Even I think modern people who from Calcutta will not know unless they have gone to the villages. He says, ordinarily the bamboo is straight, but when bent to the ground, it acts like a fish trap. So that actually, it traps the fish. The flexible nature, unless you see that bamboo trap, you'll not get an idea how they trap the fish. When the water comes, normally in rivulets or small streams, they have these fish traps to trap the fish, otherwise they'll escape. So when they are bent to the ground, it acts as a fish trap. So the desire for enjoyments is the fish. So the mind remains bent towards the world, like this bamboo trap. If there is no desire, the mind naturally orients upward and towards the Lord. Then he gives another example. Each one has a different significance. We'll first see what the other example he gives. Do you know how? Like the needles of a scale, Because of the weight of lust and greed and other desires, the upper needle does not align itself with the lower needle. Thus, one strays from the path of yoga. So, if you want a balance, then the needle should be straight. It should match. Then, another example he gives. You see, to make this point deeply impressed upon the hearers, especially the person who was asking the question, he says, haven't you seen the flame of a lamp? It flickers just by a puff of air. The state of yoga is like the flame of a lamp where there is no wind. So this example is it's a familiar example given by Sri Krishna in the Gita also, where he says in the chapter on meditation, the 6th chapter, that how should your mind be? It should be like a flame in a windless place. We have seen flame when there is slight breeze or slight puff of air, it flickers, then you can't focus on that. But if it is in a windless place, so that is why Sri Krishna says, you have to meditate on the Lord in the heart, just as you meditate on a lamp, on a flame of a lamp, which is kept in a windless place, which is not disturbed by puffs of air. Then he gives another example. Our mind is spread out in different directions. A part of it has reached Dhaka, a part of it has reached Delhi, and another part Kuch Bihar. So these are some of the places Sri Ramakrishna is referring to. Now you have to collect this mind and concentrate it to a point. So if you want a cloth worth 16 annas, there are 16 annas to a rupee. So 16 annas, 1 anna was 6p in those days, 6 paisa. So 16 annas made 1 full rupee. So if you want a cloth worth 16 annas, equivalent to 1 rupee in those days, you have to pay this amount to the cloth merchant. Even if there is, you can't say that I'll give you 10 annas and give me the cloth, which is worth 16 annas. That means you have to be fully committed to your spiritual practices. Even if there is a slight obstacle, yoga is not possible. And Sri Ramakrishna is giving an example which was pretty modern in those days, the telegraph wire. It was a new invention. Obviously, it was used in Calcutta. Somebody must have told him that this is how the signals are transmitted, and the telegraph, that was the system. But sometimes the signals are not transmitted when it is broken. So somebody must have told, and Sri Ramakrishna immediately gives this example. He said, if the telegraph wire is broken, howsoever small the break may be, it will not convey your message. So one has to be, especially when you meditate, the mind should be unbroken. There's another beautiful example given, something similar to this, by Shankaracharya in his Vivek Chudamani. It's like the oil which is poured from one vessel to another. If you take water and pour it, there'll be breaks. It will not fall in a continuous stream. But if you take oil, there's a beautiful continuity. When you pour, it pours, and there are no breaks in that flow when you pour it. So he says it should be, that's why they say Taila Dhara, means your mind should flow towards the object, just as oil is poured from one vessel into another. So Taila Dhara means the dhara, or the flow of the oil. It should be like the flow of the oil, not the flow of water or flow of something else. So it will not convey the message if even there is a small break in the telegraph wire. Now, after saying this, he is trying to explain to this. Obviously, the person who is asking this is a householder. So if he gives this very high ideal, perhaps he will feel that, oh, this dispassion, this vairagya, this one-pointedness, having no desires, oh, that's a very tall task. I can't, perhaps, it's not for me. So lest he is discouraged, after explaining what is the highest standard that is expected of a devotee or of a sadhaka, He's telling Trailokya, who is there. Of course, Trailokya was household, is to sing beautiful songs. He's giving an example, Trailokya and the power of faith. Work without expectation of reward. Second topic. Compel yourself to say, you are my mother. I mean, the Lord whom you worship, especially if she is a divine mother. So he is telling now, the same devotee, you are living a householder's life. What harm is there in that? I mean, said you can't just say that you will immediately practice this highest dispassion. But he gives him a condition. It doesn't mean that because you are a householder, you cannot realize God. You can, but you have to surrender the fruit of one's actions completely to the Lord. One must not expect any reward whatsoever. But then he says, even so, the fact that the desire for bhakti is not to be counted as desire to love the Lord, desire to practice spirituality, that is also a desire. But it is right to desire bhakti and to pray for it. And not expecting a reward is a very tricky thing, which Swami Vivekananda has clearly explained in an article or in a talk which he gave, which is published as Karma Yoga, Work and Its Secret. In that talk, Swami Vivekananda says, because this is a very confusing idea. How can we work without expecting a reward? That's a very tough question or tough task. You can't tell somebody that you do and just don't bother about the reward, whether you pass or fail or anything happens, you just don't be bothered. That's not the right way to work. People may think working without reward is something like that. To be very careless, do work whichever way one likes, and just be careless about everything. It's not carelessness. One has to understand what this not expecting any reward means. Once Swamiji mentioned this in his talk. It's a very important sentence. Unless you read every word of that sentence, it is difficult. He is translating Bhagwan Sri Krishna's famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which is very often quoted by thousands of people. And you ask anybody, he said, oh, I do everything. I don't bother about the fruits. I mean, I am so careless that I don't bother. If something goes wrong, don't tell me. I'm following the Gita. That's not the attitude, actually. If Swami Vivekananda has translated it in a few words, and every word of that is important. He says in his Karma Yoga, whenever you do any work, don't think about what its effect is on you. You see, he is very careful. Don't take into consideration what its effect is. If you just stop the sentence there, karmani va adhikaraste na phaleshu kadachi. Don't bother about the fruit. Fruit for whom? Fruits, what are the fruits that accrue when you do some work? It will result in something. If you do an operation, either it will be successful or it will be failure. So are we not supposed to bother what the fruits are? If I study, I'll either pass or I fail. So I should study and not bother about the result. That's the common argument that is given. How can this be possible? So here, Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji clarifies, one must not expect any reward. It's a much better translation. Instead of saying, don't bother about, the literal translation would be, if you translate this sentence carelessly, do all work in dispassionately and don't bother what its fruits are. If you just say that, then it would be wrong. That's why Thakur here is so careful. He says, one must not expect any reward. Swamiji explains it in a slightly different way, but it means the same. Then do all work, but don't bother about what its result will be or what its effect will be to you. To you means the work has to be done perfectly. For example, if a doctor is operating, he may feel that I will do my best and something happens, then I'm not bothered. So I'll not be concerned. I'll do it in a very merciless way or a very detached way, or not taking care to see that the right result comes. What is meant here is what it means to you. Subjectively, it is not important what it means, whether you are praised for what you do, or whether you are criticized, or whether you are rewarded, or whether you are not rewarded. That is, you should not bother about that. But that doesn't mean you have to do it imperfectly. You have to be very careful what its fruits are for the object, for the person who is involved. Otherwise, it will create chaos. You can't expect work done haphazardly to be called as karma yoga. So that is what he's warning. He said, you don't expect a reward. If you get it, you accept it. If you don't get it, it's fine. But your duty should be done perfectly. That is the idea. So, but then he says, there are so many desires, anticipating the question. Then they'll say, then we should not even have desire for bhakti. Let us be lukewarm in sadhana. Why should I not? If you are asking me not to have desires or too many desires like the holes, rat holes, because it will leak away everything, then I should not have desire for bhakti also. He says, no, there is no, it should not be counted as a desire. It is right for one to have desire for bhakti and pray for it to the Lord. Then he says, not only that, you have to employ the tamas of bhakti. This is unique to Sri Ramakrishna. Everybody thought that one has to be a sattvic person to get bhakti. But if you see some of Ramakrishna's disciples, they were very tamasic people, especially Girish Chandra Ghosh and all. They were not very good sattvic people, but they had tremendous bhakti. You can call it tamasic bhakti. That you have to employ the tamas of bhakti. You must force mother. Means he said, if you have anger, or if you have many emotions which are considered to be not very conducive, not very sattvic, but if you direct it towards mother or direct it towards the Lord, they actually help you. So that is what he means when he says you have to employ the tamas of bhakti. You must force the mother. In one of the songs, he's quoting a song, and I'll conclude, then we'll have some question answers. He is giving a beautiful song, not the whole song, but 2 lines from Ram Prasad song. He says, the lawsuit between mother and the son shall gain momentum. You should remember, Ram Prasad was a clerk, and in a firm, though he was a saint, he hardly did any, he did some accounts, and he had heard of lawsuits and all those things, legal matters. So he's using that language here. He says, if there is a lawsuit between the mother and the son, and it shall gain great momentum. You don't have a lawsuit with mother, but he says you can even do that and file a lawsuit against the Divine Mother. And he says, I shall only lie restfully when the mother, having pardoned me, raises me in her arms. Means I'll be determined. If necessary, I'll go to the court, I'll fight. So that is the tamas of bhakti. So he says, even Ram Prasad, when he felt helpless, that mother was not showering her grace on the child. So the child has a right. So some of the Sikh devotees who had come and saying that we have a prayer in our religion that we thank God for everything. Thank Him for the bread that we eat. Thank Him for the food that He gives. Thank Him for the wonderful light and the wonderful sun that shines upon us, wonderful waters, and everything is given us for free. So we are thanking nature, thanking God. So Sri Ramakrishna somehow did not like that attitude. He said it is okay as a prayer, you thank, but if you are really close to God, if you consider God to be your mother or father, then do you thank your parents for what they have done to you, what they have done for you? You don't do that. You don't go and thank your mother for cooking your dinner every day. You may do it to a stranger, but if somebody is your own, you have a right to demand, or you feel so close that you feel that you don't have to supplicate them. So this supplication may be good in the beginning, but Sri Ramakrishna said, what is so great about God giving you all these things? Has he not created us? So he's bound to give. Pray for something else. Don't thank him and don't waste your time thanking him for the silly little things which we anyway get. So you don't have to, you ask for higher things. God can give you higher things. Don't just thank him and be happy with all the things that nature has given you. That is the idea. So he says, Trailokya once said, he's quoting Trailokya, as I have taken birth in her family. I mean, this is the culmination of tamasic bhakti or tamasic devotion, where the child says, I have a birthright. Mother has given me birth. She is the creator. She is the universal mother. So I have taken birth in her family, means I am her child. So I have every right to her property. So even in a legal language or in a legal way, devotion can be expressed. I say, you have your own mother. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is explaining, she is no artificial mother. She is not even a godmother. Whom can you force if not her? Just say, Mother, I am prematurely born child of weak constitution. I am not afraid of your red, angry eyes. Normally, when we worship God, it is done with so much of fear, especially the way deities and all the gods and goddesses are picturized or we see. We fear God more than love the deity. So he says, you don't have to be afraid of God's red, angry eyes or whatever form that you see. This time I am going to file a suit in the court of Shiva. So it's like I'm going to complain to Father that you are not, and I will be awarded the decree on just one point. I mean, my faith is such that I'll complain. That's the yearning of a devotee, a tamasic yearning. When he says things are not going your way, I want devotion. I'm not asking you for anything else, but I want your grace. And if necessary, I'll go to Shiva. That's how close the devotee feels. Yeah. So she is your own mother. Compel her. If you are a part of someone, you are also attracted by him. So you have every right to pray and demand things from divine, provided you feel that she or he is your own. That is the idea. That closeness or that relationship with God, according to Sri Ramakrishna, is more important than have a transactional relationship that I offer you this, I offer some offerings, and in return you please see that my things go well in my home. Most of the worship is transactional. If you see, most of unfortunately, it's very unfortunate that all our places have worship. They encourage that. You give something, you offer something and get something in return. That's just business. It doesn't work that way. Because if you give something and expect something, then what's the difference between God and a trader? You are just doing some trade. Sri Ramakrishna never liked that. Said it's your birthright. When you don't tell your father or mother, if provided you respect them and you really love them, you don't ask them that I'll do this for you and you have to in return help me with this. We are not transactional with our parents or with whom we are near, and you have a right, you have a birthright. So Ram Prasad says, I have a birthright, and my mother, as my mother, you have to give it to me, otherwise I'll complain to Shiva. But under no circumstances Sri Ramakrishna would allow a transactional relationship with God. He said that is the lowest thing. It's pure business. That you consider God to be a trader, a person or a authority who will just give you rewards just because you have offered a few things to him. These objects, and even some people offer gold and in Tirupati and all. So they think Once Sri Ramakrishna scolded Mathur Babu. He said, for you it may be gold, it may be very precious, but for Lord who owns the whole universe, what a silly offering you are giving to the Lord. It doesn't mean anything to him. He is himself owning this whole world, including you. He's the creator, he's the preserver, he's the destroyer. Will you cheat him by offering him costly jewels and other things? They may be valuable for you because your intellect is limited. So that is the idea behind this. So we'll continue in the next class. Are there any questions?
There is one question.
Two.
If the desire for sense pleasure exists in the subtle or unconscious form, they may be difficult to notice and rectify.
Yes.
So if the desire for pleasure exists in subtle or unconscious form, they may be difficult to notice and rectify. The question is, how can we detect and rectify sense desire at the subtle level?
Yes.
So that we don't waste our spiritual energy and efforts.
Yes, it is a very important question. It will require a lot of explanation, but let me be very brief. The question, I'll repeat the question for those who have not read that question. Somebody has asked in the chat that we understand the gross desires we can give up. We can have so that they don't distract us. But what about the subtle desires that are lurking in our unconscious? They may just spring up anytime without notice, and we may succumb to them. So how to deal with them, how to detect them, and how to handle them? So this is a very good question. This is in fact the whole of our upasana or sadhana that we, in Hinduism, we have something known as prayer or repeating of the mantra, that is Nam Upasana or Prarthana or any spiritual practice works at three levels. Mostly at the gross level, it normally doesn't work. So people are advised very clearly, if you pray, don't pray for gross things because those things are not going to happen. You better consult a doctor and get the problem solved. It's much easier that you get a better response. Be scientific in your approach. So gross things are not to be expected of spiritual practice. So now coming to the subtle, before I discuss how to control those desires, or which are we are not even aware of, the sadhana that we do or the prayers that we do is meant for our spiritual development or to handle our subtle personality. The gross personality, it has some effect. Obviously, it has some effect. It makes us perhaps a little more peaceful, calm. It reduces stress. So that can be felt in the body, prayers and other things. But you can't expect those prayers to just cure you miraculously and do all sorts of things. It's better to be very scientific and follow science or medicine rather than use the japa. But it definitely affects the other two levels. See, according to Hindu philosophy, there is a gross level, the body, the energies that are running the body, that are controlling the body and also making you sick or making you healthy. All these things are known as prana and annamaya sharira, that is the physical body. But at a subtle level, it does affect the mind. The manomaya kosha and the vijnanamaya kosha. There is a slight difference. It affects your buddhi. It tells you, it gives you the wisdom to understand how to deal with problems. It may not solve the problems, but it may increase the endurance. It may increase the capacity to endure things. So that is at the subtle level. But now the question is, suppose I don't know what is my problem, what are my desires, and when they are going, right now they are not there. Right now, even in my mind, I am not feeling or anticipating those desires, but suddenly it seems to come from nowhere. That is unconscious. What is meant by unconscious is the karana sharira, the causal body, which is the third layer of our personality, where our hidden desires, which are not even known to us, forget it, they may not be known to outside people, the other people, they may at least have an inkling of how our mind works and how we'll react because of the body language. They can understand. But how are they going to know how a person will react all of a sudden when he has never done that before? All these sudden things, sudden actions that are done by criminals and all, they suddenly become, these desires come from somewhere deep within the consciousness. And before they understand, before it comes at the mental level, there's no way, no warning signal. They come, they become subtle, they become gross, and then after the action, we repent. So that is the question, how to handle those desires. So those desires can be handled only by spiritual practice. Spiritual practice is meant mainly, not only, to handle our problems at the causal level, not even at the mental level. Mental level also, you can, by changing your attitude, changing your thinking, you can solve many of the problems without resorting to this. But of course, the repeated practice of a holy name, prayers, these are all not just some rituals that we have to practice if we want to be considered as religious. Definitely not. They have a transformative nature attached to it. They come with lot of benefits, subtle benefits, which has the capacity, these practices, to handle the things even before they germinate, before they come to the subtle level. When they are at the causal level, they get destroyed there. So that is, in Patanjali's language, it is known as Dagda Bija. Dagda Bija Avastha means you destroy the seeds. See, if a seed which is left without water, if you just keep some seeds outside in the soil, they may not germinate. But for that reason, you can't say that nothing will come out. The moment it gets water, sunlight, and some circumstances are favorable, it starts sprouting. So similarly, those seeds, they are there. They are harmless right now. They are not even appearing in our mind, nor they are appearing in our body or our actions. But they are still there. The seeds are there. So how to destroy them? Patanjali says, Dagda Bija means the only way to destroy the seeds is burn them. If you burn a seed, no matter how much water you pour, it's not going to sprout. A dry seed may sprout, but a burnt seed. So the specific word used in yoga is Dagda Bija Avastha. Means Dagda Bija is the only way, remedy to your question, that if we follow the principles of Patanjali or also the Vedanta and all the sadhana that is discussed in our tradition, you will find the repetition of the holy name has the power to burn your karma, burn the seeds. That means burn your karma. The karma, seeds of karma are in a very latent form, in a very unmanifest form in our unconscious, or you may say causal body. So they are there and they will be responsible for our future suffering or happiness. They will determine. Our karma will determine where we will be born, how we will be born. After death also, these seeds are not destroyed. The causal body remains. It is carried from one body to another. So the answer is, the only way to detect, we cannot detect them. It's better to destroy them. You know, there are some seeds. We do not know the nature of the seed, what they will sprout into. So why bother if they are just burnt? That is what we do in weeding. We just weed, we burn everything so that the weeds do not come. That is how the weeding is done. So that is a very good example which Sri Ramakrishna is to give, that when you burn the seeds, when you weed it, destroy the seeds, there's no chance of any karma or any desire sprouting. Hmm? It's okay? Okay. No time. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.